Think you're an INFJ 5w4, but something just doesn't quite fit? Or maybe you've always felt like an INTP, but those deep emotional moments creep in. This video dives into the subtle, yet crucial, differences between these often mistyped personalities, helping you finally pinpoint your true self. Stop wondering and start understanding. Let's open with a question that catches more people than you'd think. Are you sure you're an INTP, or could you be an INFJ with a strong intellectual streak? It's incredibly common to confuse these two, especially when an INFJ overlays a 5w4 Enneagram fixation. Both can be intensely cerebral. Both prefer solitude, read widely, and dislike superficial chatter. Both can sound detached one day and deeply contemplative the next. And both often feel like outsiders in a noisy world. But beneath that shared surface, the engines are different. Today, we'll dissect what's truly driving you, so you can stop trying to wear a mental uniform that never quite fits and finally settle into the operating system that's been yours all along. Here's the promise. We'll lay out where the overlap comes from: intellectualism, introversion, a hunger to understand, and then pull apart the core differences in cognition, motivation, communication, stress responses, creativity, and relationships. I'll give you field-tested markers, micro-tells, and quick experiments you can run on your own mind this week. By the end, you'll have a clearer answer: INFJ 5w4, INTP, or something else entirely. First, let's separate two frameworks people often fuse. MBTI describes how your mind organizes and processes information, its preferred functions and the order you lean on them. Enneagram describes why you do what you do, your core motivation. An INFJ with a 5w4 fixation is an INFJ by cognitive process, but the 5w4 drive can make them look, sound, and schedule life like a scientist poet. Meanwhile, an INTP can also wander into soulful territory, especially in private writing or late-night philosophical spirals, but the scaffolding remains analytic first, relational second. The same library aesthetic can hide two very different librarians. Let's zoom into the engines. INFJ runs on ni fei ti say. Translation: a quiet, convergent future pattern radar, ni, that wants to cohere meaning, paired with a relational barometer, fei, that tracks emotional climate and seeks humane alignment, supported by inner analysis, ti, and a pragmatic, what's real right now, sensor, say, that often gets underused. INTP runs ti nei si fei. They lead with structural analysis, T, building elegant internal models, paired with option exploring curiosity, nay, supported by memory, detail archives, C, with social attunement, fei, in the backseat. In conversation, an INFJ 5w4 may sound like a T-first philosopher because they've cultivated precise language, but if you watch the trajectory, the INFJ's insights move toward meaning, direction, and human implications. The INTP's insights move toward frameworks, distinctions, and logical cleanliness. One is, where is this ultimately going and what does it mean for people? The other is, what is the most internally consistent model and how do these pieces actually fit? Here's a quick in the wild test. When you read a complex essay, what compels you to annotate? INFJ 5w4 tends to underline conclusions and teleology, where the argument is aiming and what it implies about purpose, ethics, or the larger arc. They'll jot reflections like, this suggests we're moving toward X as a culture, or, if this trend continues, here is the likely human cost. INTP tends to circle definitions, assumptions, and edge cases. Their margin notes look like, term B is being used inconsistently, what if we invert premise A? Or, counterexample, scenario Y breaks the model. Both are smart, both annotate, but for different reasons. Now, motivation. Enneagram 5w4 wants mastery and identity. The 5 seeks self-sufficiency through knowledge. The 4 wing seeks singularity, my authentically me perspective. This can drape an INFJ in quiet intensity. They retreat to preserve bandwidth, hoard energy, and build a distinctive worldview that feels earned. But the INFJ's fade doesn't vanish. Even when cloistered, they're modeling how their ideas should land on others, and why people's needs matter to the direction they choose. Meanwhile, INTP's core motivation is epistemic clarity and intellectual freedom. They withdraw primarily to think without interference. Identity tends to emerge as a byproduct of the ideas they've refined, not a focal quest. If the INFJ 5w4 sounds like, I need to protect what's true to my vision so I can serve what really matters, the INTP sounds like, I need to get this right, period, and then we'll see what should be done. Let's talk creativity pipelines, because both types are famously creative in different ways. INFJ 5w4 creativity is slow-cooked and teleological. They incubate a pattern until it gels into a singular, coherent piece that feels inevitable. They often experience click moments, where an insight consolidates all the floating fragments into a narrative arc or design that just fits. They might spend a week brooding, then draft something in one evening that reads startlingly finished. INTP creativity is exploratory and generative. They make idea maps, try permutations, and tinker. They'll produce multiple versions, run model comparisons, and delight in elegant hacks. Their click moment is when the minimal model that explains the most emerges from the tangle, not necessarily when a single story lands with moral resonance. Both can write essays. The INFJ feels like a single beam of light. The INTP feels like a constellation you can navigate. Here's a linguistic micro-tell. Listen for verbs. INFJ 5w4 often uses verbs of direction, becoming, and responsibility. This leads to we're moving toward, we owe it to. What this means for people is INTP prefers verbs of structure and possibility. This implies we can formalize. Another way to frame this is let's define. Consider the boundary case. One calls you forward, the other dissects the terrain. Emotion is where many mistypes start. INTPs feel they're not robots. But notice how emotion enters. INTP emotion often surfaces as a side-channel commentary they analyze after the fact. I noticed I was irritated here, why? They'll classify it like data and then adjust their model. INFJ 5w4 emotion is braided into the insight process. Feeling tones color which insights gel. They might not emote outwardly, but you can sense a moral gravity under their analysis. When they present their idea, it arrives with a felt conviction that this matters because people matter. If you've ever had someone silently listen to you and then say one sentence that lands like they saw your whole story, odds are high you just met FE riding shotgun to knee. If you've ever had someone deconstruct your claim with surgical fairness and hand you 3 cleaner ways to say what you meant, hello, TI guided by nay. Under stress, the divergence widens. INFJ typically flips into a clumsy, sensory, get control of the real world now mode, say grip. They become uncharacteristically reactive or perfectionistic about tangible details. The room has to be fixed, the project tidied, the schedule redrawn today. They might binge on stimuli or micromanage logistics as a way to feel grounded. INTP under stress often spirals in teenage loops, overanalyzing, multiplying hypotheticals, and struggling to land. They may procrastinate while building the perfect mental solution, or ping-pong between options without committing. The INFJ looks weirdly decisive and fussy in the moment. the INTP looks suddenly indecisive but hyperverbal. Let's address the secret extrovert effect. Both can present as surprisingly social in the right context. INFJ because Fae activates when purpose requires connection. INTP because Nay loves idea play with sharp minds. Watch The Hangover. INFJ 5w4 will often leave social spaces with an emotional ledger. Did I make space for that person? Did the room get what it needed? They'll also need quiet not just to rest, but to reconcile the event with their vision. INTP will leave with a conceptual ledger. We never defined the terms. Next time I'll start there. The INFJ's fatigue is moral existential. The INTP's fatigue is cognitive stimulus overload. Relationships reveal core priorities. An INFJ 5w4 in love still looks like an INFJ. Future-oriented, loyal, and tuned to the partner's emotional ecosystem, but with stronger boundaries and solitude needs than many INFJs. They curate who gets access and prefer a shared mission or story. Their ideal intimacy includes aligned values moving somewhere together. An INTP in love seeks a mind they respect and freedom to roam intellectually. Affection looks like making your ideas sharper and your world more rational. They may express love by building systems that reduce chaos in your life or by giving you the cleanest explanation you didn't know you needed. If an INFJ 5w4 asks, "Who are we becoming together?" the INTP asks, "Does this relationship preserve our freedom to think and build well?" Career patterns can also illuminate type. Both can thrive in research, writing, design, and tech. The INFJ 5w4 gravitates to roles where insight drives people impact. Strategy with a human lens, coaching with intellectual depth, narrative design, policy analysis with ethical architecture, UX research informed by meaning. They're the ones who say, "We can do this smarter and kinder." INTP gravitates to roles where model quality is king. Systems architecture, data modeling, algorithm design, pure research, technical writing that clarifies complexity, product design that strips bloat. They're the ones who say, "If we clean the logic, everything else improves." In meetings, the INFJ won't speak often, but when they do, they'll link disparate threads into a direction and ask for buy-in. The INTP will poke, refine, and propose cleaner abstractions. When they go quiet, they're likely optimizing the schema in their head. Here's a mini self-experiment you can run this week. Set a timer for 10 minutes and write your thoughts about a difficult life decision. Don't edit, just write. Then read it back and code it. Do you naturally forecast narratives, speak in arcs, and weigh human implications before technical ones? Do you reach a singular, "this is the direction that fits" conclusion? That's INFJ NFA flavor, even if the prose is precise and intellectual. Or do you naturally list premises, test assumptions, propose alternative framings, and converge on a general principle or decision rule rather than a singular narrative? That's INTP TNA. If your piece ends with, "There are 3 viable approaches, contingent on variables X and Y," you're probably wearing a T crown. Let's tackle the 5w4 overlay more directly. Many INFJs mistype as INTP because 5w4 dulls some visible Fae and amplifies the love of theory, privacy, and independence. The interior voice says, "I must understand deeply before I can responsibly move." They're slower to share and quicker to withdraw, making people assume, thinking type. But under the hood, the moment insight crystallizes, Faye wakes up and asks, "How do we shepherd this into the world in a way that's right for people?" Conversely, some INTPs mistake themselves for INFJ 5w4 because they periodically encounter oceanic feelings or produce lyrical writing. The difference is when and why it happens. INTPs often reach the ocean after a long chain of reasoning strips away distractions. Feeling arrives like the weather after math. INFJs often start with a weather report and then find the math that suits the climate. Another angle few discuss: time orientation. INFJ tends to compress time into an internal storyline that privileges the future. They'll tell you who someone is by telling you who they're becoming. They'll choose present sacrifices for an envisioned outcome. INTP tends to privilege present tense model elegance and conditionality. They'll say, given what we know now, the cleanest structure is this. If data changes, we update. The INFJ can look preachy to a T mind because they're already living 3 chapters ahead. The INTP can look non-committal to a NE mind because conditionality never stops. Let's do 2 micro case studies. Case 1. A friend is considering leaving a stable job to launch a risky venture. INFJ 5w4 listens quietly, tracks the friend's tone, maps the story they want their life to tell, and then offers a distilled sentence. It sounds like you're afraid of betraying your steadiness, but your life theme is stewardship of bold ideas that serve people. You should build a runway and go. They will also check in on the partner, the family, the values alignment. INTP listens, interrogates assumptions, lists knowns, unknowns, and frames a decision procedure. If you can reduce burn rate by X, validate market fit with Y experiments, and hit Z milestones in 6 months, go. Otherwise stay and re-evaluate. Both are helpful. One hands you a compass, the other hands you a blueprint. Case 2. A debate gets heated in a group chat. INFJ 5w4 senses who is hurt, who is posturing, and what value is colliding with what fear. They craft a single message that reframes the conflict and invites better ground. INTP identifies where the thread derailed logically, restates terms, and proposes a tighter problem statement to disperse fog. Again, both bring gifts. The signatures differ. Now, stress recovery rituals. INFJ 5w4 restores through meaning and small, controlled sensory anchors. They journal to recohere a story, then do something tangible but gentle, tidying a small space, a walk with intentional noticing, to coax say into alignment rather than grip. INTP restores through clean solitude and low-stakes tinkering. They'll disappear into a rabbit hole that has no immediate consequence, configuring a tool, simming a model, reorganizing notes, until baseline curiosity returns. If, after a rough day, you find yourself seeking a decisive, closing arc, and a minimal, beautiful sensory action, you're likely INFJ. If you seek a frictionless sandbox and the joy of a cleaner schema, you're likely INTP. Let's address the soft-spoken authority phenomenon. Both types can project calm gravitas. The INFJ 5w4's authority comes from quiet conviction that a pattern is true and morally weighty. When they speak, others feel guided. The INTP's authority comes from crystalline reasoning that stands even if you kick it. When they speak, others feel oriented. If people often say, "You said the exact thing I needed to hear to move," that's INFJ. If people often say, "You made that make sense for the first time," that's INTP. A quick caution: don't type yourself by hobbies or aesthetics. Black turtlenecks, sketchbooks, philosophy podcasts, and a disdain for small talk live in both houses. Instead, type by process when stakes are real. When a decision truly matters, what takes the wheel? A felt, convergent through line that asks for humane alignment, or a structural, internally consistent model that asks for logical cleanliness? That's the fork. Here's a 5-minute litmus you can try tonight. Take a persistent life problem you've been avoiding. Step 1. Describe it in 3 sentences. Step 2. Without thinking too hard, write either A. The story of how this likely plays out over the next year if nothing changes, plus what your conscience says is the right direction, or B. The minimal set of variables that explain the problem and a decision rule that would work for any similar case. If option A felt like home, you lean INFJ. If B felt like breathing, you lean INTP. If you did A, but immediately wanted to translate it into B, you might be INFJ with strong T. If you did B, but then wanted to narrativize it for humans, you might be INTP with practiced Fae. Let's circle back to the opening hook. The INFJ 5w4 who feels like an INTP, and the INTP with deep emotional moments. If you're an INFJ 5w4, the mismatch you notice usually shows up in social recovery time and boundaries. You want people to be okay and ideas to be right, but your energy budget is tight. You ration interactions fiercely and prefer asynchronous connection where you can deliver distilled value. You're not cold, you're curatorial. You'll masquerade as T first only until a meaningful ethical vector appears, then you move. If you're an INTP with real emotional depth, your heart often arrives once the argument is tidy. It's not absent, it's sequential. You might cry at an elegantly constructed scene because the structure unlocked a truth. You love people by sharpening the tools that help them think. So how do you finally decide? Start with function fingerprints in motion. Do you habitually collapse many threads into a single direction and then recruit people toward that direction, Ni-Fei? Or do you habitually refine distinctions until the simplest robust model appears and then share that model, T-Ne? Watch your stress reflex. Do you clamp down on sensory control, say grip? Or do you loop in analysis and options, T-Ne loop? Examine the why. Are you hoarding knowledge to preserve autonomy and offer a singular contribution of meaning, 5w4 flavored INFJ? Or are you hoarding knowledge because truth must be right for its own sake, core INTP? Neither is superior. They're two necessary instruments in the orchestra of human thought. If you're still torn, try this week-long practice. Day 1 and 2. Journal nightly in arc form. What today means for your bigger story, where you see things going, what feels aligned. Day 3 and 4. Journal nightly in model form. What variables explain the day, what assumptions failed, what decision rule would have improved outcomes. Day 5. Reread and mark which days felt natural, energizing, and clarifying. Day 6. Ask 2 trusted friends to read anonymized excerpts and report when you sounded the most you. Day 7. Choose a tiny action aligned with the result. Either a humane nudge that advances an arc, INFJ, or a cleaner rule you'll implement this week, INTP. Your body will tell you when you've matched the engine. Before we close, a word on growth. If you're INFJ 5w4, growth often looks like inviting Say as a partner rather than a panicked manager. Build small, repeatable sensory practices that let your insights land. Short walks without headphones, 5-minute declutters, tactile hobbies. Bring tea online as a servant to clarify without stealing the steering wheel. If you're INTP, growth often looks like practicing Fae in low-stakes ways. State appreciation out loud, ask someone how an idea felt, and deliberately ship imperfect work on a schedule so C doesn't get stuck polishing drafts forever. You don't become a different type, you round out the one you are. In the end, the curious case of the introverted thinker isn't so mysterious when you stop typing by aesthetics and start typing by process, motivation, and stress patterns. INFJ 5w4 and INTP might both prefer a quiet room, a stack of books, and a long runway to think. but one is distilling a compass for people to follow, and the other is architecting a blueprint that reality can't break. One asks, what are we becoming, and who do we serve? The other asks, what is true, and how do we build from it? If you can answer which question you ask first, under pressure, you've probably found your home. If this helped you see yourself more clearly, that's the point. Clarity is kindness, especially to your future self. Drop a comment with the moment that clicked for you.